She was mocked the moment she walked onto the range just for bringing an old Glock and wearing round glasses like a schoolteacher. A gruff instructor sneered, "Do you even know which end the bullet comes out of?" The entire group roared with laughter like it was a joke. But minutes later, that same woman silenced them with 3 dead-center shots that didn't waver a millimeter. What they didn't know, she had once been a legendary sniper trained by Delta Force. Rachel Monroe didn't look like she fit at Blackstone Tactical Academy, a high-end live-fire range sprawled across the dry, dusty outskirts of Texas. The place was built for serious players, retired agents, private security hotshots, and wealthy gun enthusiasts who dropped thousands to train like they were headed to war. Drones hummed overhead, their cameras catching every shot for analysis, and the air smelled of gunpowder and hot metal. Rachel's boots crunched on the gravel, worn at the toes from years of walking back roads. Her plaid shirt was faded, tucked loosely into jeans with a frayed hem. Her brown hair hung straight, brushing her collarbone, and those round, wire-rimmed glasses sat low on her nose. No makeup, no jewelry, just a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, sagging with the weight of something heavy. She moved quietly, her face calm, but her fingers lingered on the bag's strap, a small sign of the steel beneath her stillness. The laughter hit her before she even reached the bench. A tall guy named Derek, his AR-15 slung across his chest like he was posing for a magazine, leaned toward his buddy, his voice loud enough to carry. Did she take a wrong turn from yoga class? His friend Travis, a stocky guy in a shiny new tactical vest that screamed trust funds, snorted. Better glasses shake more than the trigger does. The words were sharp, thrown like darts, the kind of casual cruelty that comes when people think you're nothing. Rachel didn't look their way. She set her bag down, unzipped it with slow, careful hands, and pulled out a Glock 17. Her fingers moved with a quiet rhythm, checking the slide, the magazine, the chamber, like she'd done it in her sleep. The group kept chuckling, a few guys nudging each other, but Rachel's face stayed blank. Her jaw tightened for a split second, then relaxed as she turned toward the firing line. The head instructor, Carl, was a hard man, all buzz-cut and squared shoulders with a stare that could make recruits sweat. He'd started the mocking with that bullet jab, and now he watched Rachel, his arms crossed tight. Something about her bugged him. She squared her shoulders, locked her elbows, and sighted the target 50 yards out. Her stance wasn't just good, it was perfect military grade, like she'd been carved from a training manual. Carl's smirk faded, but he kept quiet. Derek, though, couldn't resist. He stepped closer, his voice dripping with fake kindness. "Hey, sweetheart, you sure you don't need a tutorial? I can show you how to hold it." The group erupted, clapping like they were at a comedy club. Rachel tilted her head just enough to catch his eye. Her gaze was steady, almost too calm. "I'm sure," she said, her voice soft but clear, like a bell in the quiet. Derek's laugh caught in his throat, and he shifted his weight, looking away. A woman named Claire, her nails painted red and her designer sunglasses perched on her head, pushed through the crowd, her voice cutting like a knife. "Oh, honey, you're embarrassing yourself just standing there. This isn't a bake sale." She flipped her hair, turning to the group for approval, and they obliged with snickers. Claire pointed at Rachel's boots, her lip curling. "Those look like they came from a thrift store dumpster. Did you borrow them from your grandma?" The crowd howled, some mimicking her sneer, others snapping photos of Rachel's worn boots. Claire leaned in, her perfume sharp, and stage whispered, "Maybe stick to knitting, yeah." Rachel's hand paused on the Glock's grip, her knuckles whitening briefly. She didn't respond, just adjusted her stance, but the air around her seemed to tighten like a string pulled taut. "Before we keep going, can you do me a quick favor? If Rachel's quiet strength is hitting you right, grab your phone and hit that like button on this video. Drop a comment below, let me know what you're feeling. And if you want more stories like this, stories about people who've been judged but keep standing, hit subscribe. It means a lot, and it keeps us sharing these moments together. All right, back to the range. As Rachel assumed her stance, a grizzled range assistant named Tom, who'd been cleaning benches in the background, froze mid-swipe. His eyes locked on her hands, how her fingers curled around the Glock with surgical precision, how her elbows formed a perfect angle. He'd seen that grip before years ago during a classified demo at Fort Bragg. Tom dropped his rag, his mouth half open, and shuffled closer to Carl, whispering, "That's not just training." "That's her." Carl shot him a look, annoyed, but Tom's voice shook. "I was there when she outshot the SEALs. Her name's in the records, Monroe." Rachel didn't glance their way, but her shoulders relaxed slightly, like she felt the shift in Tom's gaze. The group didn't notice, still snickering, but Tom's face said it all. He knew she was no amateur. The air was thick with dust, the sun beating down on the steel targets lined up across the range. The drones kept buzzing, their red lights blinking as they recorded. Derek wasn't done. He turned to the group, grinning like he'd just invented the wheel. "All right, let's make it fun. If she hits even one target, I'll buy lunch for the whole class." The crowd whooped, clapping, some pulling out phones to capture what they thought would be a train wreck. A woman named Jessie, her blonde hair pulled tight under a Louis Vuitton cap, nudged her friend, a skinny guy named Kyle. "This is going to be hilarious. She's going to shoot the ground." Kyle laughed, his phone already rolling. Another guy, Mike, a retired cop with a beer gut and a voice that carried, piled on. $10 says she flinches so hard she drops the gun. The bets flew, each one meaner, each one louder. Rachel stood at the line, her back to them, her hands steady on the Glock. She didn't turn, didn't react, but her fingers brushed the grip, a small gesture like she was steadying herself against a wave. Kyle, emboldened by the crowd's energy, stepped forward, his phone still recording. He zoomed in on Rachel's face, narrating like a sports commentator. "Here's our contestant, folks, about to make a fool of herself. Look at that shirt, did she pull it from a laundry basket?" The group cackled, egging him on. He circled her, staying just out of arm's reach, and pointed at her bag. "What's in there, your lunch?" "A thermos of tea." Someone yelled, "Bet it's her knitting needles." Kyle grinned, leaning closer. "Come on, Grandma, give us a show. Miss every shot so we can go viral." Rachel's eyes flicked to him just for a moment, her expression unreadable. She shifted her weight, planting her feet firmer, but her silence only made Kyle laugh harder, his phone shaking in his hand. The target was a standard silhouette 50 yards out, easy for these guys, or so they thought. Rachel raised the Glock, her grip textbook, thumbs forward, wrists locked, eyes focused. The range went quiet, not out of respect, but because they wanted to enjoy the failure. She fired. The shot cracked through the air, sharp and clean. The target didn't move, but the drone feed on the overhead screen showed it a perfect bullseye, dead center. A murmur ran through the group. "Lucky shot," Derek muttered, but his voice wasn't as loud now. Rachel fired again. Another bullseye. Then a third. 3 shots, 3 perfect hits so tight they almost touched. The screen zoomed in, showing the holes clustered like they'd been punched by a machine. The laughter was gone. Carl walked to the target board, his boots crunching in the dirt. He stared at the holes, then back at Rachel. She was already lowering the gun, her face blank like she'd just tied her shoe. As Carl inspected the target, a young tech running the drone feed named Ryan fumbled with his tablet, his eyes wide. He zoomed in further, the screen now showing the bullet holes in microscopic detail, each one perfectly centered with no tearing, no deviation. Ryan tapped his earpiece, muttering to his supervisor. "This isn't random." The drone's AI flagged her shots as machine-level precision. He pulled up a graph on the screen showing Rachel's trigger pull, a flat line, no tremor, no hesitation. The crowd didn't understand the data, but Ryan's supervisor, a retired Marine, stepped forward, his face pale. "I've only seen one shooter with a graph like that," he whispered to Carl. "It was her Monroe in 16. Rachel holstered the Glock, her movements unhurried, but her fingers lingered on the slide like she knew the room was starting to unravel. The silence didn't last. Derek forced a laugh, too loud, too shaky. "Beginner's luck. Anyone can get lucky. Hit 10 in a row and I'll legally change my last name to Monroe." He spread his arms, playing to the crowd, expecting them to rally. A few chuckled, but it was weak, uncertain. Jessie rolled her eyes, muttering to Kyle, "No way she does that again." Rachel set the Glock down and reached for her glasses. She took them off, folded them carefully, and tucked them into her shirt pocket. Her eyes, without the lenses, were sharp, almost startlingly clear. She didn't smile, but her lips curved just enough to make Derek shift his weight. She walked to the bench, opened her bag, and pulled out a Remington 700 sniper rifle. The crowd stirred. That wasn't a beginner's gun. Carl's head snapped up. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, his voice tighter than before. Rachel didn't answer. She just loaded the magazine and walked to the 300-yard line. Before Rachel could settle into position, Travis swaggered forward, his tactical vest gleaming under the sun. He planted himself between her and the target, hands on hips, blocking her view. "Hold up, let's not waste ammo," he said, his voice booming. "This chick's gonna choke, and I'm not here to watch a meltdown." He turned to the group, winking. "Bet she's never even seen a sniper rifle up close. Probably thinks it's a toy." The crowd laughed, some shouting, "Get her a BB gun." Travis leaned down his face inches from Rachel's and mocked her in a sing-song voice. "Don't cry when you miss, okay, sweetie?" Rachel stepped back, her boots scraping the dirt, and looked at him. Not angry, not scared, just steady. She adjusted her grip on the rifle, her silence louder than his taunts, but Travis just grinned, soaking up the crowd's cheers. The drones adjusted their hum, filling the air as they tracked her. The target was smaller now, a steel plate with a scoring ring no bigger than a grapefruit. Rachel settled into position, prone, cheek against the stock body, aligned. Her breathing slowed, visible in the slight rise and fall of her shoulders. The group watched, some still smirking, others starting to frown. She fired. The plate rang a clear metallic ping. The screen showed the hit dead center. She fired again. Another ping. Then another. 10 shots, 10 pings, each one landing in the smallest ring. The drone feed zoomed in, showing 0 handshake, 0 recalibration. Carl muttered under his breath, "This is Special Forces level, or legendary." Derek's face was red, his jaw tight. Jessie's phone was still out, but she wasn't recording anymore. She just stared, her mouth slightly open. As Rachel stood, a faint breeze stirred the dust and a folded paper slipped from her bag, fluttering to the ground. Emily, the quiet student, darted forward to pick it up, glancing at it before handing it back. Her eyes widened. She'd seen a faded emblem, a Delta Force crest, and the words Monroe R scrawled in ink. Emily clutched the paper, her hands trembling, and whispered to herself, "It's really her." She slipped it into Rachel's bag, but not before Kyle noticed his smirk fading. He nudged Jessie, muttering, "That wasn't just some random note." Rachel didn't react, just slung the rifle over her shoulder, but her glance at Emily held a flicker of gratitude. The crowd was too stunned to notice, but Emily's heart raced. She'd touched proof of a legend. The range felt heavier now, the air thick with something unspoken. Rachel stood brushing dirt from her jeans and carried the rifle back to the bench. She didn't look at anyone, didn't wait for applause. There wasn't any, just silence, raw and uncomfortable. Carl broke it, stepping forward, his voice gruff but with an edge of something else, maybe respect, maybe suspicion. "Nice shots, but who the hell are you? Without ID or certification, you're still a nobody. This range is for real operators." He crossed his arms, expecting her to shrink. Rachel paused, her hand on the rifle case. She turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. "I'm here to shoot," she said, her voice even almost gentle. "That's all you need to know." Carl opened his mouth, then closed it. Her tone wasn't loud, wasn't sharp, but it landed like a stone, heavy and final. Mike, the retired cop, wasn't ready to let it go. He lumbered forward, his face flushed, pointing a meaty finger at Rachel. "Don't get cocky, kid. Those shots don't mean nothing without a badge or a name. You're just a wannabe playing dress-up." He turned to the group, his voice rising. "She's probably some range bunny who watched too many action movies." The crowd laughed, though it was nervous now. Mike stepped closer, looming over her, and snatched her canvas bag from the bench, holding it up like a trophy. "What's in here, huh?" "Your diary. A romance novel." He shook it, expecting laughs, but Rachel's hand shot out steady, catching the strap. Her eyes locked on his, cold and unyielding. "Put it down," she said, her voice low. Mike froze, then dropped it, stepping back, but the crowd's laughter stung like acid. The group shifted, their confidence crumbling. Mike, the retired cop, tried to laugh it off. "What, she's some kind of secret agent now? Give me a break." But his voice cracked and nobody joined in. Jessie whispered to Kyle, "Did you see her hands? They didn't even move." Derek was quiet, his AR-15 hanging limp at his side. Rachel started packing her gear, her movements slow and precise. She slid the rifle into its case, zipped her bag, and adjusted her glasses back on her nose. The drones were still recording, their red lights blinking. Carl watched her, his frown deepening. He opened his mouth to say something, but a new sound cut through, boots on gravel, steady and deliberate. Everyone turned. A man in a black suit approached, his face hard, his badge glinting in the sun. He was older, maybe 50, with the kind of walk that said he'd seen things. He stopped beside Rachel, ignoring the group. "Agent Monroe," he said, his voice low but clear. "We've been looking for you. The Department of Defense needs your expertise to train our new sniper division." The words hit like a shockwave. Derek's head jerked up. Jessie's phone slipped from her hand, hitting the dirt. Carl's arms dropped to his sides. The man turned to him, his eyes narrowing. You just mocked the only person on record to hit 18 moving targets in a crosswind of level 6. He didn't raise his voice, but the weight of it filled the range. Rachel didn't react. She just kept packing, her hands steady, her face unreadable. As the man in the suit spoke, a low hum cut through the air. Not the drones, but a black SUV pulling into the lot. The driver's door opened and a woman in a crisp uniform stepped out, her eyes scanning the range. She carried a tablet, its screen glowing with a classified file. She approached the man in the suit, saluting, and handed him the tablet. He glanced at it, then at Rachel, his expression softening. Monroe's record isn't just in the books, he said, loud enough for the group to hear. She's the only sniper to neutralize a hostage crisis from 800 meters in a sandstorm. The tablet screen flashed a grainy photo of Rachel younger in gear, her rifle steady. The group gaped, their phones forgotten. Rachel zipped her bag, her face unchanged, but her husband's hand on her shoulder tightened a silent anchor. The group was frozen, their faces a mix of shock and shame. Mike's mouth hung open, his $10 long forgotten. Jesse's friend nudged her, whispering, "Is that her husband?" But the man wasn't her husband. He was just the messenger, the one who'd come to pull Rachel back into a world she'd left behind. The real shift came later when another figure appeared at the edge of the range. He was tall, broad-shouldered, in a plain jacket and jeans. He didn't flash a badge, didn't say a word. But when he walked in, the air changed. Derek looked away, his face pale. Jesse's friend stopped, whispering. Even Carl, who'd been trying to regain control, went quiet. The man stopped beside Rachel, his hand brushing her arm. She glanced at him, and for the first time her face softened, just a flicker, but enough to make the group realize who he was. Her husband. Nobody needed to say his name. His presence was enough. Rachel finished packing, slinging her bag over her shoulder. The man in the suit was still talking to Carl, his voice clipped. Blackstone will be honoring Agent Monroe as a legend of this facility. Effective immediately. Carl nodded, his jaw tight, but he didn't argue. The group started to disperse, their bravado gone. Derek muttered something under his breath, but it was weak, barely audible. Jessie picked up her phone, her hands shaking. Mike just stared at the ground, his beer gut sagging. A young woman in the back, a quiet student named Emily who'd stayed out of the mocking, stepped forward. She was maybe 20, her eyes wide. "Ms. Monroe," she said, her voice trembling. Rachel paused, turning. Emily swallowed. Can I get your autograph?" The question hung in the air, fragile but real. Rachel's lips curved, not quite a smile. She shook her head gently. "Just keep practicing," she said. "That's enough." The news spread fast. By the next morning, a military blog had the headline, "The Living Legend Who Shoots Straighter Than Machines." It detailed Rachel's record 100 perfect bullseyes at 600 meters, a covert op that saved lives, her training with Delta Force. The comments section was flooded. Some called her a hero. Others said she was a myth. But the truth was simpler. She was a woman who'd walked away from it all, who'd chosen a quiet life until the world came knocking again. Derek didn't show up at the range after that. Word was he'd been dropped from his security firm for conduct issues after the blog's readers sent clips of his mocking to his boss. Jessie's Instagram, where she'd posted a snarky video of Rachel's first shots, got slammed with comments calling her out. She deleted the post, then her account. Mike lost a sponsorship deal with a gun shop when the story spread. Nobody apologized to Rachel. Nobody needed to. The consequences were already there, written in their silence. As Rachel packed her gear, Claire wasn't finished. She sauntered over, her sunglasses now shielding her eyes, and tossed a crumpled dollar bill at Rachel's feet. "Here for your bus fare home," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You don't belong here and you never will." The bill fluttered in the dirt and the group snickered, though it was quieter now. Claire crossed her arms, waiting for Rachel to react, to pick it up, to break. Rachel paused, her hand on her bag, and looked at the dollar, then at Claire. She didn't bend, didn't speak. She just stepped over it, her boots kicking up dust, and kept packing. The crowd's laughter faltered, Claire's smirk twitching, but the insult hung in the air, raw and ugly. Days later, at a formal ceremony at Blackstone, Rachel stood quietly as the academy's director pinned a Legends badge to her shirt. The crowd knew, recruits, instructors, even some press, was silent, awed. A young girl, maybe 12, pushed through clutching a worn notebook. She'd snuck in her dad, a groundskeeper, and held it out to Rachel. "My mom said you saved her unit in 17, she whispered, eyes shining. "Can you sign this?" Rachel hesitated, then took the pen, her hand steady, and wrote, Keep aiming true." The girl beamed, clutching the notebook like a treasure. The crowd murmured, some wiping tears, as Rachel stepped back, her husband's arm around her silence louder than any speech. Rachel stayed at Blackstone for a month, training the new sniper division. She didn't talk much, didn't mingle. She'd show up, teach, shoot, and leave. The instructors noticed things, small things like how she could adjust a recruit's stance with a single touch or spot a misaligned scope from 50 yards. Emily, the young student, watched her every chance she got. One day, Rachel caught her staring and nodded just once, like she understood. Emily kept a photo of Rachel's target board on her phone, not to show off, but to remind herself. She'd overheard Carl talking to another instructor, his voice low. "I've seen a lot of shooters," he'd said. "But she's not just the best I've ever seen. She's a living myth." Emily held on to those words, especially when the range got loud and the guys got cocky. Years earlier, Rachel had been different, not in how she looked, but in where she stood. A memory flickered as she packed her bag that day. A desert range sand stinging her face, a Delta Force trainer barking orders. She'd been 22, the only woman in the group, her glasses fogging in the heat. The trainer had handed her a rifle and said, "Don't embarrass yourself." She hadn't. 18 moving targets, a level 6 crosswind, and every shot had landed. The trainer hadn't smiled, but he'd nodded, and that was enough. Now, as she zipped her bag at Blackstone, the sound of the zipper brought her back. She didn't linger on it. She just slung the bag over her shoulder and kept moving. The range wasn't the same after that day. The guys who'd laughed didn't talk as loud. Carl started checking IDs more carefully, like he was scared of missing another Rachel. Emily kept training her shots, getting tighter, her confidence growing. She'd see Rachel's truck in town sometimes, an old blue pickup with a dented tailgate, and feel a quiet pride, like she knew a secret. The blog post about Rachel went viral, picked up by news sites, shared by veterans groups. People started showing up at Blackstone asking if the legend still trained there. The staff didn't know what to say. Rachel was gone back to her quiet life, her name now a whisper in the gun world. The last time anyone saw Rachel at Blackstone, she was walking to her truck, her husband beside her. The sun was low, the dirt glowing gold. Her bag hung from her shoulder, her ear protection dangling from one hand. She didn't look back at the range, didn't glance at the group still standing there watching her go. Her husband opened the truck door and she climbed in, her movements easy, unhurried. The engine coughed to life and they drove off, dust trailing behind. Emily stood at the edge of the lot, her rifle case in hand. She whispered to herself, "She doesn't need them to know who she is, as long as she always hits the target." Rachel's truck vanished around the bend and the range was quiet again. That moment stayed with everyone who'd been there. It wasn't just the shots, though, those were unreal. It was Rachel's quiet, her steadiness, the way she didn't need to shout or explain. She'd been mocked, dismissed, laughed at, but she'd never wavered. And in the end, she didn't need to prove anything. The truth did that for her. For everyone who's ever been judged, looked down on, told they don't belong. Rachel's story was theirs too. Her silence was their voice. Her shots were their proof. Her walk away head high was their victory. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.